Look at that, the old-fashioned recording. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, September 13th. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties on the live streaming side, so we're going to be recording this one and uploading it after the fact. But we're all kind of coming off of wasmCon, which was an amazing conference for wasmCloud, amazing conference for WebAssembly and components in general. And I'm really excited to share a couple of or at least one of the really exciting things that we did over the last week and demoed at the conference. And then we can go into checking in on one of our milestones, just general looking at our roadmap. And then I believe Taylor has an update on WASI fills that he wanted to share a little bit later as well. This one should be fun. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first thing on the agenda, which is Rust and TinyGo WebAssembly components. This is really a fun one. Let me see if I can open this up in VS Code because I don't know, it might just be easier to look at it there. So this was actually during the Cosmonic workshop at the conference, we demoed and had people launch two intro modules or two intro WebAssembly or wasmCloud actors that were WebAssembly components instead of being just like wasm32 unknown WebAssembly modules. And one of the big things about this is that these components were actually built using WIT and WIT bindgen, and don't actually include wasmCloud specific dependencies or SDKs in order to have them build and run inside of wasmCloud. So we'll take a look at the Rust one first, because I think we generally do things, we generally have a lot of our examples in Rust, and that's what I'm at least most familiar talking about. And then I'll take a look at the TinyGo one as well, and Jordan can always hop in and correct me if I say anything wrong. So looking just first at the cargo.toml, we can see that on the dependency side, we have a very normal list of dependencies. There's nothing wasmCloud specific in here, which is very exciting. That means that in order to build this actor and run it in wasmCloud, we didn't actually have to use one of our specific SDKs to get this working. We use WIT bindgen to generate types and bindings, and then we use some other crates like for error handling and guessing the MIME type, things like that. If we actually take a look at the source code for this, we can see right at the top, we have used the WIT bindgen generate macro to generate types, bindings, and specifically export this one function called WASI HTTP incoming handler. This comes from this is a function in the WIT. It's going to be our one export. This is very analogous to the way that we've done things in wasmCloud for a long time, where actors will have a certain set of incoming handlers, the things that wasmCloud can call, or technically a capability provider would call on the actor. And then it has a set of imports that it is importing from the wasmCloud host, and we use that to call capability providers. So this is called Hello Cosmo. This is just because of the naming scheme, but this actually implements the exact set of functionality that the key value counter implements. So the whole, like the end result of the contract here, the thing that this actor does is receive HTTP requests and then increment a counter in a key value store and then return that result as an HTTP response. So you can see here that we have a kind of just a unit struct for the actor name, and in implementing the guest method, we have a single function called handle. It takes an incoming request, which is very similar to our HTTP request. And then for a response, we're actually writing the response out. It's just slightly different, but you can see the business logic comes down to be very similar. When you have a GET request at /API/counter, we get the key value bucket, which you can see this is in the key value. No, that's actually an imported function. And then we can use the KV, the WASI key value atomic increment function to increment the value in the counter. And then we write out our HTTP response. Now, it's worth mentioning that a lot of this is working, this is all working directly with the WASI standard interfaces, which is really exciting. If we take a look at the actual WIT file, the thing that describes a collection of imports and exports that this actor uses, we import 3 from WASI key value. I think we don't even technically use this one. We import the WASI logging function, and then we export the WASI HTTP incoming handler. This has a couple of benefits. Of course, we're using WIT to generate the bindings and types here, which is really exciting. We're actually, when we run, get out of here, Zoom, Rust, when we run wash build here, we are actually building a wasm32 WASI WebAssembly component instead of a wasm32 unknown WebAssembly component, or sorry, WebAssembly module, lots of terminology. And has the net benefit of, again, not using wasmCloud SDKs means that it's not a requirement, or at least a constraint. So you can actually take a WebAssembly component that you've built using this world on your own, maybe even for a different framework or SDK, and run it in wasmCloud without having to change it. It's really, really awesome stuff. We can see a couple of things if we inspect the WebAssembly module. It's going to look it's going to look very similar to what we do before, because we're still signing the WebAssembly component. But we also have extra information. We can use the wasm tools toolchain and the subcommands component WIT to actually pull out the final WIT file in the world that we use for this component. So we import a couple more things, like with WASI-IO streams, in order to stream the HTTP response out. We do import WASI HTTP, which brings in some stuff from WASI CLI. But again, all of this is kind of transparent to the user. And the end goal, from what I know from all of this, is to have a nice abstraction, kind of the way that the wasmCloud SDK works today, but is grounded in just using WebAssembly components. If we take a look at actually, sorry, I saw some stuff in the chat. I didn't know if there was a question. Okay. If we take a look at the Hello Cosmo Go, this is very similar. This uses Go generate instead of, or just kind of like a WIT bind gen tool here to generate the interfaces. And again, it has a kind of a unit struct and a single function called handle, which gets a WASI HTTP incoming handler incoming request, and then you can write out to this response as well. So I think there's certainly some opportunity to kind of wrap some of these things in nice little handler functions. If there is anything that we do from a wasmCloud SDK perspective, it would be to nicely wrap some of these handlers and provide like little helpers. But that would really just enhance the experience. It's not tightly tying any of this to the wasmCloud ecosystem. If you all want to take a look at this code, let me go ahead and send this repository. This is the repo that we used for the workshop. And some of this is geared more towards launching these actors on Cosmonic, but of course that's all wasmCloud under the hood, so it'll all work the same here. Right, I definitely wanted to I wanted to show off that example because it is, sorry for the surprise light mode, it kind of hurt my eyes, so I'm sure it might have hurt yours too. I'm really proud of where we got leading up to the conference to have a pure WebAssembly component that can run in wasmCloud. And I'm really excited now that we're coming home to kind of build on that, get a little more documentation, start converting our current examples over to this this method. It just kind of goes, just kind of all works in our favor there. We also had some really exciting, a really fun time at the Bytecode Alliance hackathon, which was on Friday. Got to hang out with some of the people like Guy Bedford, who's working on the componentized JS effort to write JavaScript components, and Joel Dice, who was a main contributor and maybe even the first and major contributor to componentized Pi, which is the effort for doing that with Python components. So I'm really excited to keep experimenting with language support. I would love to be able to demo like writing a JavaScript wasmCloud actor, a Python wasmCloud actor. And now that we're compliant with all of now that we're using components as the main method to run these, that's a reality that isn't that far away. I just want to reiterate before stop for questions that wasmCloud continues to work with the WASI Preview 1 style, or the standalone WebAssembly module. So you can actually go through all of our current and existing examples, like the Echo example, all the ones that use the wasmCloud SDK to have those nice wrappers, builds a WebAssembly module. Those all still work in the OTP and Rust host, and that's not going away anytime soon. This is fully backwards compatible, is essentially what I'm saying, as we continue to experiment with adding component model support and things like that. Okay, lots of questions, or lots of talking. Time for questions. Anybody have anything they'd like to ask about this, or just kind of generally some of the work that we did for components? All right, great. Well, I really look forward to adding more documentation and examples. We're going to be sending those out in the wasmCloud Slack as we start getting some of those done. But for now, just be with us in celebrating WebAssembly components. Really fun. Taylor, I know that the other thing, or Jordis, do you have a question? Feel free to hop in.
Yeah, I was about to ask if you have any like tutorial style of to be able to learn these concepts under the workshop, instead of seeing the end goal, more like, let me guide you.
Well, actually,
yeah.
So if you look in that repo under the branches, there's a step for each branch, as well as some PRs that show the code changes. So yeah, we have start here, HTTP key value UI, and then if you look at the pull requests, gotta love it when we get that. Open it in an incognito window, Brooks.
Oh, you can do that?
Yeah, it's only triggering it because you're logged in.
Oh.
I don't get me started. I really wish it wouldn't require that kind of authentication for open source repos.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So there you go. And then each of these has so you can see the diff of code that's added for each step. So that way you can walk through. Lachlan did an amazing job here putting everything together. So you can see exactly what's added to the go thing and to the rest thing to make it to follow along with each step. So you start from basically a hello world to yeah, and you can see kind of the overview right here. So you can go from hello world to a simple key value thing to adding a UI to a couple different things like that. So anyone can follow along with that if you want to see what's going on. And given how fast component stuff is working, we can't guarantee this won't break within the next 3 weeks, but we might go back and try to update that as quick as we can if a lot of people are using it as a learning opportunity.
All right. Well, I may create a pull request just to add that info in the README, so people know to leverage the branching and the PRs to be the guideline.
The only other thing that I really want to show for people who are looking at the only other thing that I want to show off, or at least highlight, is that if you are working with WebAssembly and you want to understand WebAssembly components and kind of the history, journey, motivation, all those things, I would highly recommend Luke Wagner's keynote from WasmCon. There are so many good ones. Bailey had an awesome keynote. Liam had an awesome keynote. I talked, which was fun. Taylor and Bailey had an amazing talk that you should watch. I actually, you know what, we can go ahead and show those off as well. At least pull them up.
Yeah, if you want the ELI 5 of the component model, I tried my level best to do that last on the talk I gave with Liam.
Yeah, so here is the talk that Taylor did with Liam, component model, the final abstraction. I'm pulling all of these links from our wasmCloud Slack actually in the general chat, so I won't spam and send them all here. Spaghetti code into Dreamy Fettuccine was has got to be one of my favorite talks. I didn't catch it live, and so I saw it this morning, and I regret not looking at it because it was so fun. My talk I had a lot of fun with. I did some corny jokes, so you get to look forward to that. And then, of course, it's always worth watching the short and sweet keynotes that Liam and Bailey had, WASI standards in the component model. And then finally, Bailey's keynote around Are We Componentized Yet?, which had a really awesome metaphor for components centering around a kind of a metro station, the WASM component model central station. This was really fun. All of the talks at WASMCon are really good. It's really hard to try and recommend some because as soon as you mention one, you have like 3 more that you're like, oh, well, this one also builds on that. I really enjoyed Guy Bedford's Componentized JS talk. I know a lot of people went to Dan Goman's talk on the WASI OS. Again, I'm just going to end up naming the whole schedule. So you can see Victor's ping there, or if you just look up from the Linux Foundation YouTube WasmCon, you can find the playlist. It was a great conference. I think, after going to a lot of like KubeCon WASM days, where it's kind of all jam-packed into a day, and you like, it's very kind of wild seeing everybody really quick and then it's over. I really enjoyed having 2 days with multiple tracks and all of that. So huge shout out to the organizers, anybody on the program committee, and all of that. I can't speak highly of it enough. Wow, I got on a little tangent there. Let's see. Taylor, I was gonna actually see if this was a good time to go over your work or like kind of updates on WASI-Fills, because I think the discussion or like going over the roadmap, we can always just kind of do in the end, and this follows into that well.
Well, actually, it falls into that. So if you just pull up the roadmap, I can talk about it in context of the roadmap.
You got it. Tell me if this is the wrong roadmap.
Don't we have a Widify
Oh,
one?
yes.
Okay. So we are almost there. There's some stuff we need to do. Like I have my name on there to migrate the Blobster FS to use our provider SDK. There's actually another issue that I think just opened that you can add into here, Brooks, from Connor. That was around publishing the nuke rates, which we'll need to do for everybody to do this kind of stuff. So we're going to be landing a few of those things. The other stuff that we have to worry about is, as Bailey mentioned in the in the chat, we are waiting for resources and streams to land. That will obviously necessitate another breaking change to stuff. So that's something that will get us there, though, because those kind of some of the last pieces that have to fall into place inside of WIT. And it will clean up a lot of stuff, because you may have noticed when Brooks was showing off some of the code that we abstracted away some of the grossness of dealing with the pseudo streams and pseudo resources we have as part of like that code. And so that should go away. The other work that we're doing is, I mean, if anybody wants to follow along, there's 2 related. I'm going to link them in here. So that is the WASI-Fills RFC. It's already slightly out of date, but I'd rather just show the updates through code when I finish it and get it working. The same basic principles still apply. And then there's also a possible issue that could not be an issue that we're discussing in the WASM tooling space. And so I'm working on getting WASI-Fills working, because until we get WASI-Fills working, we can't support custom contracts, which means we can't fully deprecate Smithy and all that, because custom contracts are core to the value prop of wasmCloud. So I am I am working on, yeah, you can add it to the Witify thing there. And so I'm actually going to be testing today to see if it works, because apparently it might work with the way we figured it out. Well, mostly Bailey, and then I just helped out, figured out how to get that working, and then I will update from there. But basically, as soon as we get that kind of part landed, and then I have a concrete thing of how WasmFill should work, we're going to add tooling to make sure that WasmFills are pretty much auto-generated. You can always handwrite them or choose your own encoding, but for like the default encoding that the underlying WASM bus uses and all those things, we're hoping just to have like basically like a wash generate. So when you're writing a new interface, you'll say like wash new interface. It's going to walk you through like creating like the interface if you want to create like a first or an example provider, as well as creating the WasmFills for you. And then those will get automatically generated for almost all use cases, and like unless you're using something advanced. So that's where things are standing out there. But we're getting very, very close to having those things. Like I said, it's closer than I thought it was going to be after talking at Bacon last week at the Bike Alliance conference. It triggered some discussions there, and it might work. And if it doesn't work, then we have the right people engaged to help fix it, because it's definitely at a level that I'm afraid I would muck everything up at if I tried to implement it, but I might try anyway, as is common in this space. So anyway, that's where we're at with defining things. So as Brooke showed, you can already do this with the core like wasmCloud contracts. So we're working on making it so you have everything you're used to having. And then it means we can deprecate WasmBus RPC. It means we can deprecate all the Smithy stuff and all those things once we get to that point. So that's where we're currently at with the work. That's kind of our effort for the next month or so, as things land in the open source like stuff with Wasm, and then lands from there into wasmCloud as soon as we get it. So yeah, that's where we're at with the WIT. Any question?
Yordis, I see you had a couple of questions in chat. I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna wrap up looking at the roadmap, and then I think we can just go on to full on end of community call Q&A, because I think you had a lot of good questions there.
Yeah, sorry, I'm taking note. So please, sometimes just ignore it. Yeah.
No, it's great. So yeah, I just wanted to generally look at the roadmap. I'm glad we pulled this up because we've taken a look at the Witify milestone. A couple of things have made it in here. I also filed a new milestone just to start categorizing some future work that doesn't quite fit into defining our interfaces with WIT specifically. It's more around support for all of the wasmCloud core interfaces in wasmCloud, which I know that we have implementations for incoming HTTP and the key value for sure, the things that we got working for some of those, but there are other ones in the wasmCloud core as well that we'll want to support around messaging, things like runtime config. We'll see where we get with Blob Store for sure. I know that we need to spike a little bit about maybe some of these, but I want to be able to support any component that's built with wasmCloud core and regular WASI interfaces to work in wasmCloud out of the box. That's of course the goal here. But taking a look at just the high level roadmap, we've got a lot of, I guess this should probably be in triage. We've got a lot of work that is in the now stage. Most of it is actually, the majority of it is complete. Taking a look at the work status page, we've got a ton that's completed there, which is awesome. We are no longer unblocked. Actually, in fact, I think this one is actually done. Bailey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the latest version of Wash actually does launch the Rust host. So I'll go ahead and move that to completed, which is, you know what? Let's test our automation here. If we close this issue, fixed in, where do we do this? Thank you for riding along with me on this roadmap journey. I'm pretty sure when we close this issue, it should move to the completed pane in the roadmap. And I just want to make sure that that works. Should be here, closed in 7:59. Thank you, Bailey and Connor, for working on this one, and Roman. So if we say that this one is closed by 7:59, we can close this issue as completed. Aha, look at that. GitHub project automation. It does work. So if we go back to our roadmap, we can see that that popped over there. Great. So we have an RFC, which is open. This one should be closed soon. I think we've already proven that defining interfaces using WIT works. It's great. And then in general, we're going to be tracking supporting the standardized WASI worlds. These are kind of the remaining, and this is a smaller effort, but these are the remaining things we have in progress now, which again, I'll point everybody back to the roadmap page on wasmCloud.com. Goes through the high level efforts that we really want to support and work on through the end of this year. And if we finish all of it, I guess we'll just have to come up with more work, or maybe we take the rest of the year off. One of those things will happen. So very, very exciting stuff. Okay. Just wanted to do one last update on the general wasmCloud roadmap. Once we get through some of these things that are on our now list, we will start, next will become now, later will become next, and then we'll start looking at more things to do, which is really exciting. Great. A huge shout out to everyone on the wasmCloud team, everyone who has contributed to wasmCloud over the past, well, forever, but especially last couple of months as we're working towards this milestone. Really fun stuff. I think now is probably a good time just to open it up generally for any questions. I know Yordis has thrown a few things into the queue, which I think are going to be great discussion points, which is why I want to leave some time. Anyone else is obviously welcome to raise their hand and jump in too. Yordis, do you have any questions that you want to talk about here? If it's just notes, that is totally all good. But
yeah, I leave it there. So like, maybe in the reverse order, is there any process or place where discussions are happening around designing particular WIT component interface, something like that?
So there's lots of places, and it depends at what level you want to talk about. There's the wasmCloud level, right? So I feel like we're like at the top of this pyramid. So we have some of our wasmCloud specific interfaces, but there aren't many. That's a small set, and that's why I think of it as almost like a pyramid. Moving down, there's another area, which is the Bytecode Alliance organization, and inside there are only a few that are not part of WASI. So the one that I'm thinking of right now is WASI Vert. But I think probably your question is actually about the meetings that we're having within the Bytecode Alliance, where Taylor has been bouncing back and forth, for example, in that issue with Peter and Alex, coming up with the right solution for how to design our WASI fill. And so that issue has a lot of good context there, and we talk about it a lot in our component model biweekly. Is one place. The place that they're standardized at is inside the WebAssembly organization. So there's the WASI working group, which I'm a co-chair of, and that's where we're talking about the WASI Cloud Core, WASI CLI, and the WASI HTTP proxy worlds. And so those are the ones that we basically just demoed with. A lot of their design is happening basically in issues for each one of their repos. Each one of those that I just named all have their own repo inside the WebAssembly GitHub org. And then we have a biweekly meeting for WASI where we don't usually have discussion necessarily in those meetings. It usually happens asynchronously over tickets. That was probably too much information, but there it is.
I'm taking notes. I'm creating a backyard of notes about it. So like following up to that, because I was focusing more in the wasmCloud perspective. Yeah, so it will be more from the wasmCloud, like where how somebody's supposed to open up the conversation, how to go about it, where's the process around the wasmCloud level of width design.
I think this meeting's a good one. And then otherwise we like chatting over Slack. We've been pairing up, trying to work through and make it work first, but I imagine almost all of it'll happen over Slack.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I anticipate, so if you're in the wasmCloud Slack, which just general call out for anybody who's tuning in later, you can always come and join us in Slack at slack.wasmcloud.com. The link is at the bottom of the website. We have many different channels there, and that includes, I don't want to silo any discussion to stifle discussion, but we have a wasmCloud channel, and we also have a WebAssembly channel. And I know on my end, I'm trying to be intentional about posting things that go around the development of WebAssembly standards or updates there. I think the WebAssembly channel is a great place to ask questions there that generally don't specifically revolve around wasmCloud and is more about WebAssembly, but that'll be a great place to watch if you're coming in and new and want to learn about the development there.
Yeah, I have other two things, by the way, so just waiting for give a buffer somebody else.
Yeah, I always appreciate when people ask questions for other people too. Don't keep it inside because other people have the same question. I see that you also had a question around the washboard, the new. I assume you're talking about the new wasmCloud dashboard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been messing around with the front end part of it. So, I've been just trying to figure out what you are envisioning in the future. Because what I'm doing more or less is just changing the UI perspective of it, having more like a sidebar layout, so you can actually scale adding functionalities in the sidebar in the future, right? And clean it up, maybe thinking about the user experience that you're envisioning, instead of having everything to be in just one page. Maybe that's the vision, but yeah. So yeah.
Well, if only we had a maintainer here, Lachlan. I don't know if you're available, Lachlan, but I'm assuming you can give insight to what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm asking for permission and trying to actually be aligned with you all, because I'm messing around and I have sometimes, but I don't want to be, like neither cause you problem or, going in a direction that definitely you didn't envision, which thus far, it seems that I am in line with, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Lachlan?
Lachlan. Yeah, I think you got it. You got it pretty well.
Lachlan, yeah.
Yeah, I think the core of this discussion is what the washboard is meant to be, like what is the responsibility of the project. And I think at its core, and the functionality that it implements now is kind of a not necessarily observability in like the open telemetry sense, but you can observe the state of the lattice. You can see what actors and providers and link definitions exist, and you can do that on multiple hosts. I think an extension of that, which I would love for the washboard to be able to do, is act as another control interface client to be able to issue commands, things like, hey, go start this actor, go delete this provider, things like that. And we've had discussions in the past about the washboard being user extensible. I would definitely need a little expertise or somebody who is well versed in that to, you know, help me understand. Like if you come into the washboard and not necessarily contributing to the core code per se, but like you wanted to add like a visualization to show, you know, how many actors have been running over time, something like that. That's a neat idea. I think it certainly falls out of the MVP of what the washboard is, which is what it is now. But I'll stop talking before I say anything wild. Lachlan, did you have more thoughts?
Yeah, no, sorry, I was not in the room. What Brooks said is exactly it. It's we're determining what the purpose is for it, and we're never against good ideas. More than happy to take contributions for it. The washboard as it is right now is a half replacement for the one that was coupled with the Elixir host. So because we transitioned to Rust, we needed another one. So you've read that RFC. So it doesn't do some of the things that the existing one did. And I believe that that's mentioned in the PR that got this one across the line. It's close, not necessarily be compatible with, because there's things that the old one can do that the new one won't necessarily be able to. But there's more details on that in the PR. But basically, because the existing one was coupled with the host, you could do things like upload a file directly to the host. Whereas now, because it's sort of detached, it is its own thing. That feature would mean that we'd need to get a way to get the file, the bytes of the actor and provider across to the host over NATs, and that's not something that's possible just yet. Yeah, that's a good question, Victor. What's a good way to run the old UI? I believe the best way is to do wash up and specify a version, which would be 63 would be the version that did. And yeah, we did have a slightly different design. We were just trying to, one, get something across the line quickly. There was a week-long project, if that sort of made that happen. And two, think about the things that people are going to be doing with a washboard, like with that UI versus just the regular CLI. So if you've got thoughts and patterns and ideas that you want to implement, more than happy to see a PR for it, and we can work together on getting that implemented, integrated, all that sort of stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, for me, I was just, like I say, just trying to focus on a sidebar layout that you can scale it in regards of really high level capabilities. And then in the section that would change per one of those menus, the same, you're thinking about it horizontally, how to scale as well. Kind of like Argo CD, if you want to think it more or less that way. And then you have the drawers that will come up if any. So I work in micro frontend before, so that's why I'm asking for direction in terms of like, okay, where are you going for? That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. It's I think the only reason we didn't include the sidebar at the moment is just there wasn't a need. It was just a status page.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we find more stuff to stuff in a sidebar, then better to have the place to do it than not need it. Yeah, I agreed with Victor. Mock-ups and thoughts on what you would want it to look like, even if it's just like a code pen that has an example of what you would want it to look like. Because I think you can run it even without having the connected to the Lattice. You can still at least run the front end and see what it looks like. It just won't fill in any data. But yeah, cool.
I'm going to go in actually and create a milestone. Trying to use all the GitHub things. I'm going to create a milestone in the wash repository around, I think I'll call it washboard stable release. I'm bad at naming, but right now, you know, the washboard is behind the experimental flag. I feel very pew about adding new features to it and experimenting there because it is behind the experimental flag, but I would love to make that be something that we release as well, not experimental hence stable. And so I think the washboard first wave, I think it'd be great to have a little bit of a design doc, nothing crazy, just like an issue to track like what exactly we would want it to like what we want the washboard to look like, and the functionality that we want it to have to bring it out of experimental, and that'll really help with just putting that in a central place. Does that sound like a good idea, Lachlan, Yordis, everybody else in the washboard? Thanks, Taylor. Okay.
I'm here to satisfy your SpongeBob meme needs.
Cool. I will call it. Yeah, I'll create an issue there, and then I might just ask for
Washboard first wave is totally my vote.
washboard first wave. It is. Cool. Because I want to, you know, I want to keep adding to the washboard now.
Yeah. The last question I have, sorry, the last question I have is related to wasmCloud itself. I think is like when somebody's developing actors and capabilities, whatever. Like actually the actors. Like where do I put? Okay, in a pipeline, and ignore the assembly for now because I don't know how to explain this. Like I can either make my functions aware of loggers, telemetries, all the stuff, or I just wrap my function in those things and a lower level in the infrastructure, something like that. So what wasmCloud wants me to do when I'm implementing the actors? Do wasmCloud want me to define those dependencies and I have control over and I have to wrap it? Or in the long term, do wasmCloud wants me to say, hey, don't think too much about this type of quote unquote infrastructure because sometimes it's gonna leak into your actors. Some sort of this infrastructure concerns because we're gonna wrap your components.
So there's two views here. As it stands right now in the host, you get every single call instrumented if you've turned on open telemetry. So you know anything that goes into your module and then out of your module, if you want it to be that way. So like that's all available to you. If you want to be like instrumenting specific functions on the inside, we don't have a plan for that yet, but that's the kind of thing where in the future I see us possibly doing something where, oh, hey, here's an instrumentation like component you can have, you can pull in like an instrumentation contract of some kind that might be standardized across most of the industry. Those are the kinds of things where we could wrap it. And the thing is because of the idea of being able to layer it, you could technically wrap any call you want to. So if you have like your cool contract, you could have a thing that exports your cool contract and just passes it through to the next thing that does your cool contract, but then add some instrumentation around it. So all of that is entirely doable in the future, but like right now it's entirely in the host, and you'll know when things are called. And because of the underlying like wasmbus protocol, you have the idea of what methods it's calling as well. So you know that at least that's happening.
Right. I'm assuming the same for, I'm going to use, I think, like, I'm assuming that you're going to apply, add capability to add filters to those pipelining, right? Because I'm thinking in loggers, open telemetry, authorization, authentication, stuff like that, like, you know, all the things that normally you may want in the pipeline, but not necessarily, you know, complected with your code, but more like around it or composed with it. Yeah.
Yeah, did that answer your question all the way, Yordis? Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, no. I think that there is some like work to be done in the future. So for now, I guess I can just myself declare the dependencies and then be able to figure out how to, you know, collect feedback and put it in the wasmCloud level, I guess, at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, any high-level feedback when it comes to how it feels to build an app with wasmCloud is super helpful, because I think the end goal is that whenever you work with wasmCloud, you are thinking primarily about just the functional logic of your application. And anytime that you stray into non-functional requirements, or if you feel like you're building that into your application, then that kind of raises a flag to think, could we be doing this in a better way, with our whole philosophy.
Yeah, there is one functionality that honestly, I don't know how to think about it, and it comes from the event sourcing part of it, where the event sourcing capability provider could have the pipelining where you load the events and then apply the events and then run the command handler. The problem is that when running the command handler, from my experience, you may want to actually return back to the one who controls the flow. I mean, we use Ecto, so it's kind of like Ecto multi, if you want to see it that way, where like you actually return back like a definition of a chain of functions that you need to call at some point, but you didn't call the functions right there and then. So it's tricky because, like, okay, do I need to now open up? Like, I don't know how to think about the width and how to return function pointers back to my environment that are not necessarily part of the interface, for example. And if that's not possible, then that means that I have to figure out how to add the capability, the functionality I want inside the component through a framework or something like that. So that has been the biggest pain point that I don't know how to, think about it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this really just speaks to, what's the right way to say this? This speaks to the idea of capability abstraction. When you start to, or when you try to boil down a capability into an individual interface or a common abstraction that can be fit by multiple patterns or implementations, you have to do that essentially with the lowest common denominator view. HTTP, it's actually really easy. It's nice. Just take HTTP request, return HTTP response, right? But then when it comes to event sourcing or data pipelining or interactions with a database, you can have, kind of the thing that you're talking about here, Yordis, like with Ecto. I forget the exact thing that you said, like create multi or multi-command. When you start to leverage really specific functionality or look for something that you've used in a framework specifically before and find that missing from the, from the interface, it can feel like, that can feel strange. And really, I think what this comes down to is the implementation details here. Using a capability provider for the event sourcing capability like concordance is going to have, every implementation is going to have its own way of doing things. And the advice that I've always given, which I think is always worth examining if it's the right answer, is the more specific your contract gets, the less you end up benefiting from the abstraction that you get from, like, hey, this could work with any event sourcing provider. And it may just mean that, this is the time where your contract is tightly coupled to your requirements, and that's okay. Using the contract in this way, you still actually do get the benefit of being able to hot swap that capability provider out. Like if there was a bug or a vulnerability, you can still hot swap it out with a new version. You just won't be able to change to any event sourcing capability provider, for example. And that can be okay. Once your application gets specific enough that you have those requirements, then that's the guidelines that I've always kind of given for that specific part. That might not be the best answer sometimes, for people who want to have, something that's turnkey. I'll definitely look to Kevin for any specific advice around, if this is like a, something that we can optimize within concordance, but it sounds like kind of a new operation, and it might be worth like design spiking around that, for example.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of like I'm chasing that turnkey, like you don't care too much about it. Like, let me remove as much as I can from your user space, relying on frameworks or something like that, because then I have to implement it in every single programming language for you to achieve, feel the exact same way. So I'm trying to avoid that, but I think I'm getting into, it's not possible 100% or like ideally how I envision it.
Let's see, I'll need to review the event sourcing contract to see everything that it does. But if I remember right, it essentially has very nice high level abstractions around handle command, handle event, things like that. And so I know that from the handle command function, you can return multiple events as a result of that. Does that satisfy the constraint that you're talking about here, or is it different?
No, because like sometimes you want to generate an event based on whatever the state of the aggregate is in the exact same command handler. So basically you have to be like enqueue the event, apply the event to the aggregate, then do the next operation, because that application on that event would evolve the aggregate into a state, and then you're going to make assumptions about it. So that's why the way commanded does is like something like ecto, where you create a multi, which basically just a data structure that eventually will get run behind the theme. So you just stack function pointers that are eventually gonna get run, but it's not enough to return the events out. Like you have to raise the event, apply it, then do the next thing. Yeah, Kevin, go ahead. You're the expert here.
Yeah, commanded actually does it the same way we do it. I actually modeled the concordance one after the commanded library. So with commanded, you can do a multi, but that multi is based on the state prior to the receipt of the command. And that's exactly what concordance does. So the aggregate receives a command and the state, which are tightly coupled. And so it receives the command in the state. You then return 1, 0 or more events in response to that. And then that same aggregate will, at some later point in time, be delivered that event and its state. And there's a bunch of reasoning behind it, but the blog post where I talk about how commands aren't real does a bit of explanation in terms of why the events come out of the aggregate the way they do. But yeah, short version is that the commanded multi is essentially the same thing as concordance returning a vector of events.
Let's follow up on a Slack there, Kevin. I don't think they are the same, at least from my perspective. I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying like I don't think that's the case though. But let's follow up in a Slack. I think it's gonna be much better.
Nice. Yeah, I think that sounds good. And I guess the worst and best outcome of this is just additional documentation around the way that concordance does things. I really actually like the idea of event sourcing is so opinionated and specific. I really like the idea of taking, the way that we're implementing it with concordance and pointing it to similar frameworks to say like, this has very similar side effects and implementation details as this. We're inspired by blah, things like that. So thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the kind of the call out that like the way that you've implemented it is looking exactly at the way that the commanded does it. All right, everyone. Well, I think that this was some awesome discussion. I know there's going to be a couple of follow-up things in Slack. I put the link to the wash milestone in the washboard channel, which we do have. Very fun. And I think there's going to be a little bit more on event sourcing, things like that. Thank you, everyone who is here for dealing with the whole recording thing. I'm probably going to take this video and try to re-live stream it later today just to kind of get the same effect, because I actually scheduled this when I was on the West Coast. And so it says that the community meeting is going to be at 4 p.m. today. So I might have accidentally covered my own butt. We're just going to stream it a little bit later. So I'll take that for what it is. But thank you everyone for coming. Great to be back and looking forward